Hello, I'm Liz Tran. Welcome to my studio. I am a multidisciplinary artist from Seattle, Washington, and I'm here to share a bit about my exhibition at Morton Fine Art and also just give you a little tour of my studio and some info about my process. So enjoy. So my current body of work is loosely based upon the Rorschach test, and I have early memories as a child of taking this test. And it's an inkblot test for those who are not familiar with it, and it involves mirrored inkblot images, and the viewer is invited to bring their own interpretation to it. And it got me thinking about art and how subjective it is and how everyone's experience can be completely different. For a long time I had people saying, oh, well, I see different things in your work. I see aliens, I see faces, I see lungs, everything really. And that's the beauty of abstraction. I think it leaves a lot open to interpretation. And so I really welcome the viewer's feedback when it comes to my work and honor their experience. So I thoroughly enjoy artist residencies, and I try to travel as much as I possibly can, which obviously has not been happening this past year. But I do have work from my time abroad in Iceland hanging up in my studio here. And this piece is just a string of painted fishing floats. And I collected them up in northern Iceland, where I spent about a month up there. And I would just pace along the seashore, and these floats would wash up, and they're from, I don't know, maybe 100 years. Some of these may be 100 years old. They're pretty old. And I like including the history, and not only am I picking up garbage, but including the kind of the history of fishing and life in Iceland. Through these pieces, and they're all different shapes and sizes. And so, working with materials that I find is one of my most favorite things to do. And I really like having limitations put on me in the creation of my work. I did a residency in central Turkey as well. And as you can imagine, art supplies there were somewhat limited. There was a hardware store that was rather difficult to get to. So I had to work with, I had to be creative with what I worked with. I cooked up my own wheat paste and used that to poster a room with the mural. And yes, I did have permission for that. So it's always a new experience wherever I go. And my work always changes drastically after these experiences. One of the constants in my work is the circle, and you'll find circular imagery just about in every piece I do. And to me, the circle, it represents so many different things. It represents the cycle of life. It represents the woman. It represents eternity. It represents the moon. Quite frequently, I find myself painting the moon. There's one of these paintings. And I also work in the circular format. So in the exhibition, you will see quite a few paintings based on circles, and they are actual circles. Sometimes these circles turn into something planetary or starscapes or the night sky. Most of my work is created intuitively, so I paint what comes out, and this is what comes out. So I have a deep love for paper, and I majored in painting and print art at Cornish College of the Arts here in Seattle, and I experimented with just about every kind of piece of paper I could get my hands on, including making my own paper. And what I've been working with for the past, almost 20 years, actually it's probably been over 20 years, is this calligraphy paper, Chinese calligraphy paper called Best Xuan. Here is a piece of it. So you'll find this paper in almost all of my pieces. And I love the warmth and the softness of it, as well as the way that it absorbs the paint and the inks and the pens, everything that I work with, the materials that I work with. So what I do is I'll paint onto the paper typically, and then for the Rorschach series, I'll paint on it and mount it onto panel, and then continue painting and painting and painting and painting. And what results is a very, very layered and textured painting. As you can see here, I'm an art materials nerd. I want to get my hands on every material I possibly can. Every single material. So I use a lot of pens, paint pens. I use puff paint. For those of you who were alive during the 80s, you may remember that. I paint with my fingers a lot. I also will draw and use graphite. I actually don't use brushes all that often. And I also use spray paint. Here's a pair of shoes that I painted a few years back. Some Vans. I used to wear Vans as a teenager, so this was a bit nostalgic for me. And I also paint on chairs because I don't know why you wouldn't, honestly. So outside of my studio, you'll see a mural, and this was a collaboration that I did with Zace Johnson. And we collaborated in the sense that he wrote the words. It's a statement based on where we have found ourselves with COVID. And I did this fairly early on in quarantine. And we just wanted to be a little optimistic, inject a little optimism into the neighborhood. So check them out. New Company Presents on IG. We only find victory together. Love is taller than fear.